Hello Leeds, my name is Hazelmillichamp and this is the Light on Leeds podcast. We're in February already. We're heading slowly, ever so slowly, towards brighter days, which is making me feel much better. On this episode, Hannah Gehrke, she is a tattoo artist. She's based in Red Tattoo and Piercing in the Corn Exchange. She tells me about her apprenticeship, how she's developed her style, how come she ended up in Leeds, and what she thinks of it. She's a really great guest. It's a very interesting podcast, and I think you're going to enjoy it. On this episode of the Light on Leeds podcast, I have Hannah Gehrke, who is a tattoo artist, come to speak to me. Hello, Hannah.
Hello.
Thank you so very much. Hannah, I'll just let everybody at home know we met because I had my first ever tattoo in December, and you did it for me.
Yeah, it was really good. I'm really glad that you came to see me, actually. You were a lovely customer. I had no complaints, which is always fantastic. Yeah, it was a good time.
It was, yeah. And also, I thought I might scream and the pain might be too much, but you made it all very easy.
Good. That is always a good result.
It is. So, Hannah, you are based at Red Tattoo and Piercing in Leeds Corn Exchange.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, in the first instance, how did you become a tattoo artist? What was your route?
Oh, okay. So I had always sort of been interested in tattooing since probably about 12, 13 years old, I think. There was a TV program called Miami Ink that used to be on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always sort of sit down in the evenings and sometimes watch that with my dad. And doing art and drawing, that had always been a part of my childhood anyway. So it's something that I'd always kind of sort of had in my sort of field of possible job prospects, I think, since I was very young.
Yeah.
I'd never really gone and got tattooed until I was 18. That was one of my first, well, obviously 18, but that was one of my first sort of experiences actually going into a shop, seeing how it happens, what it's like. And I was in university at the time doing a course in counselling and psychology. And it wasn't up until the sort of middle of my third year, I saw a local shop that I had been tattooed in called Broadside, where they were advertising for an apprenticeship. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to do a complete 180 on this. And I just applied for the apprenticeship as I was doing my dissertation and all my final year exams. I managed to get the apprenticeship, which was great. And I spent a lot of my time actually at the beginning of my apprenticeships for the first couple of weeks and months doing my university work at the front desk, whilst also trying to help out with customers and doing the reception, learning bits and pieces there. So it was a little bit of a mishmash to start with. But yeah, finally we got there in the end. The apprenticeship was quite a long and traditional one, I would say. So like I said, I was running the desk for a long time, helping out, I think it was 4 or 5 other artists with their diaries, doing appointments, social media, all the little bits and pieces that sort of go on behind the scenes. And then gradually, when I finally got to about a year into it, I was introduced to setting up machines, started tattooing.
Wow. So that must have been quite hard going, finishing your degree and doing your apprenticeship at the same time.
It was interesting, to say the least. I kind of had like both eyes on 2 balls. So I was just like, right, okay, how are we going to juggle this? But thankfully, my mentor, Scott, he was very good with me in that instance. I don't think I'd have been able to have done it if he wasn't giving me a little bit of leeway. So it was a case of going into university, because in the final year I was in for more like 3 days a week. So I'd go in for my early lectures, and then whenever I had my free time, I'd be in the shop, I'd be doing my work there. And then when exam days were on, I'd run up to the university campus. Thankfully, it was in the same town. And I would do my exams up there and then come all the way straight back down to the shop. And I'd be in there then pretty much 5 days a week when I finished everything. So it was smooth sailing from there on.
And do you ever feel like the skills of counselling come in handy in your role as a tattoo artist?
Honestly, I think they do. Because my intentions anyway, when I started doing my degree, was I wanted to become an art therapist, and I wanted to work with sort of children and adolescents. But I found over the years that a lot of people tend to use their tattoo sessions as a little bit of therapy. And I mean, I'm definitely not a registered or licensed therapist or counselor or anything like that. But I think people just begin to relax, and you're very much in someone's personal space, whether that's for 15 minutes or 5 hours. So a lot does come up in conversation between each other. So I do think you have to have quite the certain personality to be able to talk through things with people. Some are a little bit more closed up, some are very open. And I'll have people come in sometimes like, oh, the clutch has gone on my car today, or, this is happening in my life, this is going on. And yeah, it's a good mix of interesting conversation, I'd say.
Yeah, and I suppose you have to be a good conversationalist, because if you're going to, like you said, in a closed personal space, spend
Mm.
5 hours with somebody, it's probably better that you can chat along to each other.
Absolutely. I kind of feel like you can't really just get away with a little bit of small talk. There's got to be something else, a little bit, more skin deep, which
Yeah.
is it's always handy to be able to get away with those sorts of conversations in a nice, pleasant environment, at least.
And so going back to your apprenticeship,
Mhm.
so you talked about sort of, it sounded like you're sort of ramping up to, setting up machines and things.
Mhm.
At what point in your apprenticeship do you actually get to do any tattooing, or is it all sort of simulated?
So it really varies depending on the mentor that you go for, or that you work with, I should say. So when I say that my apprenticeship was quite traditional, it was fairly long. I've been tattooing now for about 6 years, and 2.5 of that was apprenticing. But I was tattooing a lot at the same time as well. So honestly, it can go either way for anybody. But I'm kind of glad that I had a little bit of a longer period, because I feel like I learned an awful lot more.
Hmm.
And I was able to develop my work a little bit more and trying different styles. And even though I wasn't very happy that I was told, like, look, you've got to at least try doing this. And I was like, no, I want to do my own thing straight away. It's so much better now that I have more strings to my bow and I can sort of try a little bit of everything and adapt to a little bit of everything. So I've got a wider audience of people
Yeah.
to work with, which is always handy.
And so the first time that you actually tattoo on a human skin, that must be quite
Hmm.
daunting. Can you talk me through that?
Yeah, honestly, it was horrible. So I managed to get together a couple of friends, and oh God, I didn't necessarily feel sorry for them, but I was shaking. I was so worried about doing this. I was like, okay, I've spent a year building up all this confidence to try and do this. And I did little stencils for them. I believe I just did little animal like outlines, which were probably about an inch or two big. And the first thing I remember was picking up this machine when it was running, and I was like, oh my God, this weighs a ton. It's nothing like drawing. And I'd already had a previous go on some fake skin, and basically the stuff, it's about the same texture as an elastic band, but it's a little bit thicker. And it
Right.
comes in sort of like 6x4 squares, or you can get them as like human body part shapes, whatever. I'd had a go on that, and my mentor Scott, he was like, "Right, you know what? This is nothing like a human being. We are not going to do this anymore. Get your mates in." So I was like, "Oh, okay, here we go." But yeah, one of my first appointments was with one of my good friends, Liz, and she got, I think it was like 3 little flowers on her ankle, and it went surprisingly well. Um, but I'm so glad that I finally managed to get the confidence gradually to not worry so much about it. Got over the shakes. We got over the shaky bit.
Yeah. And I suppose it's like anything, sort of the more you do it, the more natural it comes to you.
Hmm. Absolutely. I feel the more that or the longer that I do this for, the more my confidence does grow, thankfully. I mean, I think there'll always be a little bit of self doubt when it comes to doing anything in artistry. And you look at your stuff and you go like, oh, I'll change this next time, or I'll learn how to do this instead. But yeah, I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day, and tattooing is definitely one of those skills that you've got to really work on to perfect any sort of areas. But otherwise, there is still so much to learn and so much to do with it. I don't think I'll ever be at a point where I'm like, okay, I've mastered this area, time to move on to the next. It's just all continuous growth.
Which is good and
Hmm.
interesting. And so, as you've been doing this for 6 years,
Hmm.
have you noticed kind of, I imagine that you do notice sort of trends and fashions change? Are things very different from when you began to where things are now?
I've noticed things when I was tattooing, even in such a short period of time. The trends have come round and then come round again. So there's been little resurgences of certain types of styles, like maybe watercolor, tribal had, a little bit of a resurgence that came back. Same goes for sort of 90s style tattoos as well.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that I'm doing at the moment tend to be colored stuff, which is what I specialize in. But then in between them, I'll get a lot of like black work stuff or like fine line tattooing. So it's a really mixed bag at the moment. It really depends on the sort of age of the customer as well. So I never quite know what I'm going to get in my emails, but thankfully, like I said, learn a little bit of everything, and then I can supply to the masses.
And you've got your own personal style. How would you describe that?
So I would say my style is somewhere between neo-traditional and illustrative. Neo-traditional is it's a sort of spin on traditional tattooing. So
Right.
traditional tattooing is like one line width or one line sort of thickness with a very set basic color scheme to it. Whereas neo-traditional, you can get some extra line weights in, different thicknesses, and it's a much more broad spectrum of color. So I think that gives me um, a bigger sort of scope to play with.
Yeah.
And then I've always drawn very detailed, so I try to get as much of that into my tattooing as possible, which is where the sort of illustrative side of it comes to, I reckon.
Hmm. And are you often, when people come to you with their own designs, that must be really interesting to sort of see the range of things that people
Hmm.
bring.
Yeah, I always like it when people actually send over drawings of something that they'd like to get. Usually it starts with an email like, I can't draw very well, please don't judge my drawing. But I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter because at least then I know what sort of thing we're aiming for and we can have a proper discussion about it. But yeah, a lot of the time when people send over their own things, I've had very rare occasions where I've actually looked at their drawing and gone, you know what? I can actually just do that directly on you. It's so rare for that to happen.
Right.
Um, but a lot of the time when someone does send over a drawing or an image or a stencil that they've made themselves, there will be some compromises that we have to make because tattooing is not the same as drawing onto paper. We've
Hmm.
got to take some things into consideration because the human body ages, it changes over time. Skin is very different. It's a very different medium to anything else that you can get your hands on. So yeah, a lot of the time it's a case of, okay, so I can see you that you want this idea doing, but how about we turn it into this, or we're going to have to lose this idea, which we can substitute with that. Um, every now and again as well, I'll get someone who wants something maybe that's about 3 inches big in size, but they want 15 elements to it. And I'm like, okay, we are going to have to cut this down a little bit to make this work. But as long as people are able to give a little bit of, well, give and take, we usually end up with a pretty good design.
Yeah, definitely. Because I can remember I had some wording on mine, and it's
Hmm.
ridiculous, really, because I know a little bit about art, but I never even thought about fonts or anything. But
Yeah.
you were brilliant, and you thought about it because you have to, and
Hmm.
came back
Hmm.
to me, and I was like, oh my god, that's amazing! You've done exactly what I would have wanted.
Oh, fab. Yeah, there's a lot that goes on sort of behind the scenes, I think, that people don't quite realize what goes into it. And I feel like I always like to explain to people how and why we do these things because I'm not going to give anybody a tattoo that isn't going to last or isn't going to look great. I feel like that's like that will go against any sort of moral that I have. So
Yeah,
I find that it's important to be upfront and honest about how things are going to work and how they're going to look.
yeah, and you're the expert, and people, need to take advice from the person
Hmm.
who's doing the job.
That is true. I feel like every now and again I might get a little bit of pushback, and I'm gradually learning how to put my foot down a little bit more with people
Mhm.
because I don't I don't like any confrontation, and I do try to do as much as I can for people. Um, but every now and again I've just got to be like, look, maybe this won't work. Maybe I'm not the person for you who can do this. I can
Yeah.
recommend you someone else. That's fine. But yeah, every now and again I will come across something that isn't going to work. And if we can't make it work, we can't. There's no hard feelings. Um, and I can always try and suggest other things we can do, other eyes they can see, and point them in the right direction. That's all I can really do.
Of course, yeah. And so obviously, like you said, the fashion of designs sort of
Hmm.
comes around. Is it also similar with sort of which parts of the body people want tattooing?
Oh, that's a good one, actually. I tell you what, I do an awful lot of back of the arm above the elbow tattoos at the moment. That is quite a popular place.
Yeah.
Same goes for anything on the ribs at the moment. People are liking little fine line bits and pieces on their ribs. And every now and again, I will have to sort of talk through again, like, you've got to be careful where you're putting these if they're your first ones. But thankfully, people do usually end up sitting really well for them, and it's never usually an issue.
Oh, great. And would you say, is the pain thing, is it different
Mm.
for each individual? Is it quite difficult for you to sort of advise on that?
Yeah, honestly, I'd say it's absolutely dependent on the person. How someone might feel will be completely different to how the next person feels. I usually give a sort of baseline of, okay, so tattoos generally feel a lot like cat scratches, or when you've got sunburn and you scratch it a little bit, it's the more hot and prickly feeling than
Yeah.
it is like an overall intense body pain. And when I stop, it stops, but you'll kind of get that hot hum in in the area that you've been tattooed. So that's what I tend to go off, and I'll always say to people, right, we're going to start. I'm going to tattoo this little bit, and then we'll see how it goes. And then as soon as I usually start putting in the first line, and I ask, how does that feel? Everyone is always usually surprised, and the answer is usually, oh, that's it. And I'm like, that is it. And then we crack on, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, and I think your
Mhm.
description of hot and prickly is brilliant. I felt like it was like it felt a bit like, like if you've got like a really strong sticking plaster and you're
Yes.
pulling it off an area that's got hair.
Yeah.
It feels like that, like a really hot, sharp pain.
There we
But
go.
yeah, but it's not unbearable. And then weirdly, when you started doing the colour on me, I actually found that quite relaxing, and I
Yeah.
sort of zoned out a bit while you were doing that part.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. A lot of people actually prefer getting any sort of shading or coloring done over the line work.
Mhm.
And again, that's just subjective to whoever it's going on. And a lot of people, they do just like to sort of lie there and have their moment, just get the tattoo done. Little bit of me time, little bit of therapy. So yeah, it's quite a nice part of the process.
It definitely is. And so, since you began, Hannah, have you worked in lots of different tattoo parlours?
So I have worked in 3 shops altogether. So I had my original shop where I did my apprenticeship back home in Swansea. And then early 2020, I made the move to another shop in Soho in London. And I did oh God, about 3 weeks worth of work until COVID shut the country down. So,
Oh,
so yeah, that was badly timed on my behalf. But when we had those little breaks in between, and we were able to go back to work, I did manage to squeeze an appointment in and around then. And then it was a case of April 2021, uprooted and moved up to Leeds. So I pretty much did a nice triangle across the country.
it's a great
But
triangle.
yeah, it's a good one. And yeah, honestly, I am incredibly happy to have ended up in Leeds.
What made you decide to come to Leeds? Yeah, what made you decide to come here?
So the reason why we ended up coming is my boyfriend was offered work up here. And he'd already been in London for about 2 years previously. And I remember him telling me in September of 2020, he turns to me and he goes, Hannah, we got to move to Leeds. I was like, oh, right, okay. I've just moved all the way down here, but it's fine. Don't worry. At this point, I was like, I'm just going to go for it because the pandemic had really upset the apple cart with both of our jobs. So I was like, I'm just going to go for it. Bear in mind, I had never been further north than Chester.
Wow.
So it was just a real big leap of faith. And the first time that I had ever actually visited Leeds was when I was looking at flats for us to move into.
Oh gosh.
So yeah, I feel like I was quite brave because I'm quite a timid, stressy person. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go for it. And yeah, best decision I've ever made,
Oh
honestly.
well, I'm really glad to hear that. Obviously, on a podcast titled as mine is. And at the moment, you're working in Red Tattoo and Piercing in the
Yes,
Corn Exchange. How does it feel to be working in that magnificent building?
I absolutely love it. I think it's in such a lovely location. I get customers in all the time, actually, even if they are from Leeds, and they're like, you know what, I've never actually thought of coming into the Corn Exchange before. And a lot of the time, people will come in, they'll realize it's all like little small independent shops and things. They'll have a nosy round. Next thing you know, they've walked around the top of the balcony and they see us and they're like, oh, okay, there's a tattoo and piercing shop in here. They'll pop in, have a little look around, see what's going on. And I think it's a really good prime location because we do walk-in services for both tattoos and piercings as well if we've got the space and the time. So a lot of my custom also comes from that. Um, and we've got all of our artwork and stuff displayed, available designs, bits and pieces like that. So it's nice to know that people are pretty much, I don't want to say consuming, but they're aware of what we can give at
Yeah,
all times when they
definitely.
come to visit.
Yeah, and it just has a really nice feel to it, your place. I did walk around and try some different places, but I particularly liked your tattoo place. I thought it was great.
I feel like Ruth has managed to make it, who's the owner of the shop, a really comfortable, sort of cozy atmosphere. And I know there's so many tattoo shops out there anyway, like all over the place. And some are a little bit more traditional than others. And so many people have said to me, like, this is such an airy shop. There's loads of artwork on the wall. We've got plants, we've got trinkets. There's just stuff everywhere.
Yeah,
And everyone's always like, ooh, this is interesting. This is fun. So I think that brings a nice little bit of what's the word? Oh god, I can't remember the word. But I think it's more interesting for people to
yeah.
come in and have a look around.
It's got a really nice atmosphere, and also because it's so sort of light and bright, it doesn't.
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, obviously everybody's different and has different tastes, but yeah, for me, it because it was quite a daunting experience.
Yes.
Anyway, deciding to get your first tattoo and deciding what it is exactly you want and who's going to be working with you and stuff. But yeah, that's what I really liked about it. It just felt really open and welcome and light.
Oh good. Oh, that's so nice to hear. I'm so glad. Oh, that makes me feel good.
And so, Hannah, you have a really great Instagram account. I'll put all the links to all the social media in the podcast notes. But social media must be quite important to you as a tattoo artist, is it?
Yes, it is. So I don't want to say gone are the days of the book portfolios in the shop because I currently have one in there. But using things like Instagram, especially, oh God, I'm on it every day. I think I had a look at like my insights or something because I've set my account to a business account. I'm on there for like 4 hours a day. I don't quite understand how, but I think it's just flicking back and forth between it
Yeah.
because it's basically an online portfolio. That's what we all use it for. Um, and I mean, we've got to sort of keep up with the trends on there as well. Like I know Instagram especially has shifted a little bit more now towards doing like videos or reels.
Yeah.
So I've got to really try and get on top of that a little bit more because apparently they get more engagement. I don't quite know how it works, but I'm going to try and do that. And it's a lot to keep up with.
It is a lot to keep up with, and it's a bit like doing this podcast. Like I really enjoy doing the podcast. I don't mind
Hmm.
editing it, but it's the bit at the end of publicising the post is what takes the most time. And I know
Yeah.
exactly what you mean about Instagram. My good friend Debbie from that Leeds mag
Hmm.
told me she's just a social media whiz person, and she told me that on Instagram a lot of people only look at reels. So
Yeah.
and I had no, I'm getting on in age, and I didn't feel like I was
No.
being down with the kids anymore. But I did a little bit of research, and now I do reels, and she is right. I can see that a lot of people look at them and they get more sort of engagement than just normal standard posts do.
Yeah, this is the thing. I feel like I'm really going to have to get on top of it. And I think one thing that's put me off is when you're tattooing someone anyway and you've finished it all, it takes a little while to get the tattoo to settle. You want to take some nice photos anyway. And whenever I want to make a reel of something, I do have to say to my customer, I'm like, right, okay, so I'm going to put the stencil on and then I'm going to take a video. And then I'm going to do all the lines and then I'm going to take a video. And then
Yeah.
I'm going to do the color and then I'm going to take a video. And then I do all of that. And then at the end of it, I'm like, I hate it. And I'm like, I've got just like 20, 30 videos that I'm trying to all put together, and I'm like, oh no, I've wasted everybody's time. But one day I'll nail it. We'll both nail it one day.
We'll get there at the same time.
Good. Oh.
And so, Hannah, so you said that you've lived here since April 2021. So
Hmm.
that means that you have lived in Leeds long enough to answer the 3 questions that I ask every guest.
Hmm.
The first being, what would you say is great about the city of Leeds?
Oh God, right. I was thinking about this quite a bit actually, and I love how Leeds feels both so big but both so small at
Yeah,
the same time. I feel like there is absolutely everything I need in one place. I don't have to go too far out unless I really want to. And even then, there's still so many places outwards that I haven't been to explore yet because I've just come to live straight in the city centre.
yeah.
Um, I've got so many options. I'm so excited to do a little bit more exploring. We're due to actually move out of the city centre probably in April time, and I have no idea which direction we're going to aim in. But I'm hoping that we'll come across some more sort of little towns or villages and parks and more sort of like naturey areas. So that's probably, yeah, my favorite bit about it. Everything is here that I've ever really needed.
I completely agree with you about the big
Mm.
small thing. It feels like a big city, but it also feels quite intimate as well, and it's easy
Yeah.
to get from one part to another. You've got some great choices ahead because there's all sorts of beautiful places, like sort of
Oh.
around the city centre where you can sort of feel like you're still part of the city, but then you've
Mhm.
got lots of nature walks or the canal or woodland. So yeah, you've got some nice choices ahead.
Oh, fabulous. It's a little bit of what you fancy, isn't it? As soon as I find out, like, all the nice little spots and areas that I can go to, I'm gonna be obsessed.
And if you had to choose something not so great about the city, what would you choose?
Oh, trains? No, I don't know. I think with Leeds, this is a tough one because I'm just like, I like to find the best in all of the places. Um, I'm just giving you dead air now. My little cogs are turning in my brain. Very much turning. I'm not entirely sure, to be completely honest with you. I do feel like traveling back and forth to some areas around here, like outside, more like sort of Sheffield Way, Huddersfield Way. It can be quite difficult because of the infrastructure. So maybe public transport could do with a little bit of an overhaul. I would appreciate that, even though I'm a driver. It's not been the easiest trying to get out and about of Leeds altogether.
No.
But I know was it? I'm pretty sure maybe that high speed railway will be sorted at some point before I end up leaving Leeds. We'll see about that
Well, I tell you what, you are not alone by saying public
one.
transport for that answer. We get that a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and if you had to tell somebody else who had been a resident of Leeds for a very long time about something that you would consider to be a hidden gem that they might never have heard of, it can be anything, a bar, a view, a restaurant, whatever you like, what would you suggest?
Oh, this is another difficult one because I haven't really got my feelers out anywhere. But maybe this has been mentioned before, and I feel like loads of people probably know about it anyway. But my hidden gem, which I absolutely love, is Whitelocks, which is the oldest pub in the middle of the city centre of Leeds. So unless you're actively looking for it in one of the little alleyways, you're not going to find it. And in that place, if you just walk up past Whitelocks, there's a bar there that's called Turk's Head, and it is one of my all-time favourite just chill spots.
Yeah,
So I'm super into like craft beers and you know all that sort of artisanal fun stuff. That's like my sort of hobby.
yeah.
But yeah, it's a beautiful little bar that they've put up there, and they also do a fantastic Sunday dinner, which is one of the reasons that I go. But yeah, it's gonna be that. It's gonna be Turk's Head up
Yeah,
in
that is a
by
really great
Whitelocks.
one. They are two brilliant bars, and also that little
Mm-mm.
alley. I just think it's really like. I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast. I think somebody has brought it up, but I'm going to say it again. It always reminds me of being sort of like in a Sherlock Holmes novel.
Yeah, it's so great. I
It's
love
got a real sort of
everything so close
Victorian feel.
together.
Yeah, it's got that beautiful big brass. I think it's brass bar, copper bar. It's
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's absolutely gorgeous. I think that's what draws me to it. I'm just like, oh, I'm a big fan of all this interior. Why doesn't my kitchen look like this?
Yeah, that's a really good choice. Is that one? Well, I'm glad to hear that you're enjoying Leeds and you're getting out and discovering more of it. Um,
Yes.
and what will you be doing with the rest of your day today, Hannah?
So Sundays are usually my life admin day. So I've done an awful lot of just running around, picking up bits and pieces. I went and bought some shampoo. I
Ooh.
also went and bought the matching conditioner. Um, but otherwise, I'm probably just going to sit down now for the rest of the afternoon I need to get some more emails done. They're coming in quite thick and fast at the moment, which is good.
Yeah.
And then probably crack on with some drawings for the rest of the week as well. I've got some bigger bits and pieces in, which I need to really knuckle down on and get started with.
Well, fantastic. I'll put lots of links in the podcast notes so that people can click through and
Amazing.
get themselves an appointment with you there. Thank you so much for joining me today and telling me more about tattooing. I found it fascinating. And have a fantastic Sunday.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Hazel.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm sure that you'll agree that Hannah was a brilliant guest. Do check out her socials so that you can see her work, check out how beautiful it is. There's lots of links in the podcast notes, as usual. The featured song on this episode is called There Are Birds Falling Out of the Sky. It's by a West Yorkshire band called Bloodhound. It's a really, really beautiful track, so I hope you enjoy it. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I will speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
How do you get on these days? Start over, give it away. And I've listened before and it sounds the same. Can you pick me up? It's raining inside again. Move away, it strikes all too often. They say it's the same, sister, I'm trying to share the pain, share the pain. The signal is that we don't pretend. Kill it away in the feeling. Then I'll always be your best friend. Forgive me for tripping on your nightmares again.